This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Morgan Mansa. Morgan is on the front lines of one of the fastest growing challenges in America, housing affordability. As Director of Housing Affordability and Community Revitalization for Wake County, Morgan has helped drive thousands of housing solutions when building systems that move people from instability to long-term housing. Housing affordability is one of the most urgent challenges facing communities across the nation. And in Wake County, we are privileged to have Morgan with us to explain what's happening, what she's doing, and what are some of those innovative solutions that she's bringing. So with that, welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. Wake County has seen some impressive growth, and I want to get to all of the details about what's happening. But first, would you care to share a little bit about how you got into this industry and how you got started? What was your first route to this particular job or even the sector?
Yes. So it started in college. I was actually pre-med just because I knew I wanted to do something to make a difference. And at the time, that's what made sense, right? That's what a young person thinks you do. And it wasn't until a diversity and inequality sociology class that I learned about government's role in changing the lives of individuals and specifically around housing and public housing and redlining. And so it was at that point that I knew that I wanted to change majors and pursue a career in housing. And I honestly have not looked back since.
It's interesting when you hear how people start from either an education or an applied job sense. So, when you took that education route and you started to make it your life's work, what were some of the things that maybe growing up in Chicago, because that has a very storied past when it comes to housing, what
Yes.
were some of the things that started to leave an imprint on you?
At the time when you're growing up, you don't realize how your environment impacts you. But looking back, it absolutely has a lot to do with why I do affordable housing. Um, we, my family grew up in the part of the city that most don't go to visit for, if you're a tourist. But my mom moved me to a suburb called Oak Park, and it was there very early in my childhood that I saw the difference between this beautiful community that I grew up in that had access to resources and really great schools and all of those things that contribute to a great quality of life. But then going back into the city and observing that that's not the case, right? That people don't have access to, food and banks and just basic necessities. And so I think that observing that as a young person very much so contributed to why I wanted to pursue affordable housing in my adulthood.
hmm So let's talk about some of these housing solutions. Now, fast forward to where you are and what you're doing. Give us a picture of what's happening in Wake County, and then let's parlay into specifically some of the initiatives that you're doing.
Right. So Wake County is the third fastest growing county in the US, which I feel like a lot of folks are not aware of. Small North Carolina, there's a lot of growth here. And we're grateful for that. We're grateful for the tax base that people recognize that this is a really great place to live, but it comes with so many challenges. There are not enough units to house the people who have lived here. And then there's not enough units, absolutely, for the individuals who want to relocate here. And so, if you want to downsize, if you want to upgrade your home, there really aren't options for you to be able to do that. And then, individuals who are, the working, lower income households, and they really are struggling in our market even more so than the other income groups.
hmm Is that tension there where Wake County has become really popular, which is great, but then it also puts a pressure on the system related to rents and people being able to find units. So, talk to some of that. I think people think we can just build our way out, and that is a portion of the solution to increase supply. But what else are you seeing is a way that we can address affordability?
Like, I first want to acknowledge, I'm so happy you mentioned that because that is the narrative, right? That it's simply housing supply, but that is not enough. If we look back to our history, we will see that there have been other booms in growth. There have been other seasons where a lot of people relocated to a region, right? But there was never a time where just by supply alone, we were able to end the affordability issue within that area. And so if we look to that history, it tells us that alone. But then we also need to be intentional about where we're building, right? So not just focusing on, the supply piece, but where we're building is important. And we also just can't have folks waiting decades upon decades for the supply to be that solver for us.
So you're talking about the where, and this is unique because I've had a couple of podcast guests who are landlocked or they're in super density markets, and so the where they don't have the luxury, if I can say this, of being picky about their where.
Right.
What's the dynamic about the where for Wake County? I mean, as far as land and availability.
Well, because we are growing at a rapid pace, there are still parts of the county where it is a bit rural and it may not have access to jobs and education and other amenities. And so the intentionality really needs to be clear when you produce affordable housing in our market. I mean, honestly, I will argue anywhere, but it's fair. Sometimes you don't have that choice. But particularly in Wake, I think it's important, especially if you're building affordable housing, to make sure that individuals have access to upward mobility, right? Like we have to make sure we're building near, those education nodes and even just beauty, right? Greenways and parks and just other benefits that come with such a vibrant area like Wake County. I think it's important that we make sure that all residents have access to that high quality of life and they're not living in this market, but still barred physically from those benefits.
Mhm. I've heard some of the planning terms called thoughtful placement or sense of place. Those are what you see as the planning buzzwords a lot of times. Um, so there's also this piece, though, if you build it, it'll come.
Right.
You hear that a lot when you're trying to mix retail, commercial with residential. So have you seen a combination of that works for your area? Or what is happening when you think of sense of place or thoughtful placement?
So, I mean, we've seen a lot of benefits to thoughtful placement. To your point, there's this concept of placemaking, right? Where when you develop in an area that may not have a lot of amenities nearby, we'll build it all in the same, pocket, right? So build your job options next to a school and next to housing. And we have one here in Southeast Raleigh that is incredibly beautiful and it's all rooted around this local YMCA, right? So we've seen that be successful. My son plays soccer there. I see so many benefits to that just in my everyday life. Um, but I also see that other point that is very prevalent within the private sector and within the business sector of, I mean, if you build a Chick-fil-A in a particular area, people will make their way to that Chick-fil-A, right? So I also understand that from the business side, but I think that that's a very business minded concept. I don't know that we can rely on that from an affordability perspective. Um, in the private market and luxury market, sure, you can build it and they will come because you have the luxury to transport to all the other things that you need. But if you don't have those transportation options and those other resources, then I don't know that that concept of build and they will come applies to that market.
Mhm. So give me a like cheerleader point for Wake County. Like what when people think of Wake County, like what are the three great moments that they think of for people who maybe aren't familiar with your particular area?
Great. That's a really great question. We pride ourselves on very quality education. So here we have fabulous, K through 12 schools. We are also here with NC State and Duke is down the street and Chapel Hill, UNC is down the street as well. And so there's just a lot of academia here and people pride themselves on data. Rarely can we put out, a proposal or an idea and it not be rooted in data. And I really appreciate that about our market. It's also just incredibly beautiful. I think that's why people move here. It's why I relocated here. We have all 4 seasons, but it's mild, right? It's 70s in the winter. So I think that's really great too. And then I think the third and most important piece is that the people here really care about living here, right? If we want something to change, rarely, if ever, do the residents of Wake County just allow things to be unjust or allow things to be. The mobilization around getting things done is just tremendous, right? Like we work so close with our nonprofit partners, developers, healthcare, everyone. And it's rare. I've worked in two other markets and I had to do a lot more rallying to get people to join us. Whereas here people get it. And I think it's very infectious and I'm grateful for that.
Mhm. Give us a couple of stories or particular projects or initiatives that you've worked on that you would like to see replicated in other places, or you were actually taking and still building on those successes. Do you have a couple that you'd like to share with us?
Right. One that comes to mind is actually not here in Wake. It's during my time in Nashville, but it kind of set the tone for how I developed in Wake County and everywhere. We were building in a neighborhood that was historically Black. And in this neighborhood, we observed a lot of change in the surrounding blocks. And so we wanted to be very intentional about how we were building there. And so we met with the community, asked what they wanted to see, and they talked about art and they talked about preserving that through their history through art. And so we considered that element. We also saw that it was an aging neighborhood, an aging population, and so we knew that we needed there to be seniors in this development as well. And then we also recognized that there was just a family component. Families within Nashville, oftentimes Music City does not have a lot of options for families. And so that was the third piece. And so we thought, well, why don't we blend all of these three things together? And so in this singular development, we built housing for seniors, housing for families, and housing for artists. But we're very intentional about how we built that. On the first level, there was an art studio space so that the artists could have gallery, shows and different things like that to promote their art. We had a mural commissioned honoring the history of that neighborhood on the side of the building as well. And even in terms of the sinks that we built, we had them very large so you can paint, wash your paintbrushes in it. And we thought about the acoustics for musicians in the buildings too. And then built a park in the middle so that the seniors can look down from their balcony and see the kiddos. And it became organic babysitting. And honestly, every time I go back to Nashville, I drive over there to check on that building because it just was went from something that was a bit contentious and people were very worried about it to something that is just it's such a beautiful, beautiful space. They then went on to build a second phase of it because they loved it so much in that neighborhood. And I think it's one example of it doesn't have to be just one or the other, right? Like, how can we integrate what everyone needs? And it not only be, oh, that's just affordable housing. This is something that's people take pride in that type of development. You can see themselves in it. Yeah.
Mhm. Is there something about the process of affordable housing that if you could wave a wand, that you would make a change immediately about? Whether it is the policy or whether it is a dynamic, a regulation, is there something that just really hits you as a barrier or a hindrance to housing?
Honestly, I think it's the label affordable housing itself, right? At the end of the day, I'm just building housing. I'm building units for people who are looking for a place to live, and it's more expensive than what they can afford. And I think we put so many labels on it. Sometimes it's attainable, sometimes it's workforce, sometimes, and at the end of the day, we're building housing for our neighbors, and that should be the core focus. And I think once people shed those different terms and stigmas and realize that, then how can you not support that? How can you not get behind that? And in fact, I think the more industries and groups will see themselves in it and contribute to it, right?
That's an interesting dynamic. I've been working in the industry 30 years, and I even think about how the verbiage has changed,
Right.
in the 30 years that I've been working in this, like what it was called, what you didn't call it,
Mhm.
and now, now we're talking about terminology, but I think beyond the nuance of the word is the mentality of it. behind it. And so I appreciate what you're saying. I'm going to circulate that too and see because we even realize when we pull our statistics how many people are already employed who are in housing.
Mhm.
And so, there's this dynamic too that to understand that it is not people who are unemployed. And so, like, there's the tension there when you look at the analytics as well. Do you call it workforce housing? Do you call it underemployed housing? Like there's a lot of layers to this, but you're just saying call it housing because that's what it is.
Yes. Well, so many times, and I always encourage my colleagues in affordable housing to do this, but when you're building in a new market, always share what the rental ranges are going to be and always share who is going to live there. But especially with those rental ranges, when neighbors learn how much people are going to pay on a month by month basis, they're always surprised because there's this assumption that, oh, well, they're paying only $200 a month for rent, and it's going to impact my, property taxes and all these other things. And I'm like, well, you purchased your home 10, 15 years ago. Um, and what they're earning today, sure, they would have been able to afford that back then, but it's so much more expensive now. We have a competitive market.
Hmm. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to give a shout out to the Women's Affordable Housing Network, Ashley.
Yeah.
She's so great. And it's an organization that you're part of too. So I want to learn more about what you're doing in that space. I noticed that you're speaking at the
Yes.
upcoming Women's Affordable Housing Network Summit. So can you give us a sneak peek of that, or maybe why it feels so important for you to speak at that event?
Yes. So I'm the vice president of the North Carolina chapter of WAN. And I think it's important to have that space, a space for women in affordable housing, because we need a safe space, I think. And we need to be around other women who are doing impactful work, who are empowering one another. It is not a competitive group of women, right? We're competitive in the sense of we're going to achieve things, we're going to do big things, but not against one another. And I think that is so healthy. And I wish other industries embraced that concept. And so I think the WAN Summit is the culmination of that. And so I'm so excited to speak about that. My session is focusing on innovation in cities, and that's my thing. I love innovation and I love local government. And so an opportunity to share information and innovation with other leaders in this space is something that I think we need in this season. We need some inspiring stories and some things to walk away with to replicate across the US.
Is there a particular initiative with that North Carolina chapter that you guys are focusing on for this year, or something that you guys want to accomplish? What would you say that would be?
I would say it's two things. We are really leaning into mentorship in this season. So, our chapter 2 years ago kind of piloted this concept and thought it would be a one time thing, but we're really seeing that women everywhere love the idea of being one on one with someone and learning from them, but then vice versa. I think sometimes the mentors learn a bit about themselves. And so, really just accepting that, like, this is always going to be a part of our chapter and a part of something we're going to do is something we're really excited about. So don't grow and just leave others behind, right? Like bring other women with you, I think is the season that we're in.
One of the things I like to say when somebody mentions mentorship or aligning leaders is that it's not like I wish that I had had that when I first started, but it's the fact that there is value of learning the hard way. Okay. There is a value of figuring it out. And that is there are pieces of that that are really, really worthwhile. However, there's also something to be said about aligning with another industry icon, another industry expert who has already learned the hard way, because then you can go further faster.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to, learn that hard way, taking so much longer and wear and tear on you as a leader. So the value of mentorship is so impressive when you think of it in terms of being able to go farther faster.
I completely agree with that, and I hope more people embrace your mindset on that, right? Because we can all move so much further if folks are not having to start back from that first level. Yeah.
Right. Well, Quadell, we are sponsoring a couple of mentorship events at one, so we're very, very
Oh,
happy about
great.
that. Well, yes, yes. Well, as we close out, Morgan, is there anything specifically that you would like to mention that we haven't covered, or a particular note that you want to highlight?
Well, I will say that, you hosting this podcast is one example of that. I appreciate you giving voice to individuals who oftentimes just have their heads down doing the work. And, I hope that people are really seeing the value in this. And we're able to hear about people that we probably will not be able to meet in person. And so I just want to honor that because you need some inspiration in this work. It is hard work to do affordable housing. So, yeah.
It is, when you said, we just usually keep our heads down and we're doers, 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 but then you realize that there are other people who are doing such innovative things. And when I first started this podcast, I thought, it's a shame that people can't get to a conference, or, you're not in that room where you're hearing all of these wonderful things. And so this podcast just really creates such an accessibility moment for people
It
to
does.
learn if you're not in that particular room or at that particular event. So I appreciate you being on here. Thank you so much. And we are thrilled that Wake County has such leadership in place, and that you guys are on board as a community, and you guys are advancing housing and making it work there. So thank you so much, Morgan, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadell.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.